Hello, I am Rabbi Howard Goldsmith from Congregation Emmanuel of Westchester, and I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Ira Ebbin from Congregation Ohav Shalom in Merrick, Long Island. And this is another episode of Heathens and Fanatics, our podcast discussing Reform and modern Orthodox perspectives on Jewish issues of the day. Often the Torah portion, but like today, not exactly directly related. So, Ira, would you please introduce us to our topic for today?
Yes, thanks, Howie. So today, of course, is Rosh Chodesh Adar. Mishanichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha, and I wish you as much joy as to you and all of your millions of followers, Howie. I wanted to talk about a topic that's not so simcha, that's not so happy, and really is something that we wrestle with today. As we approach the holiday of Purim, we are going to read in a couple of weeks Parshat Zachar. We have the mandate Machom Timche et Zecher Amalek Mitachat Hashamayim Lo Tishkach. We are obligated to remember Amalek and to wipe out their memory from under the heaven, not to forget. And then we graduate to the holiday of Pesach, and within the Haggadah we also have this phrase, B'chol dar v'dar omdim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation, they stand up against us to try to destroy us. V'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu mi'adam, and God saves us from their hands. And I guess, given especially some of the issues that are going up today, that are being discussed today, without getting too much into specifics, is the issue of anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel and Zionist issues today. And the question is, why? Where does this all come from? And how do we explain this phenomenon?
Great. Ira, thank you for the great introduction. So I first want to say where I see it, anti-Semitism manifesting most profoundly today. It's actually not in irresponsible tweets and comments by Congress people. I see it manifesting today primarily through the double standard to which Israel is held. From among all the nations of the land. Now all the nations of the world. Now I am the first person to criticize Israel, to say that I disagree with this or that policy, to say that I hope for a different government to come into power after the next election. But I do it from a place of love for Israel, a sense of coalition and partnership with, politically speaking, with Israelis with whom I agree. And a sense that Israel can be better. The vilification of Israel that we see at the United Nations and in the press is not the same. Very often that vilification is holding Israel to a standard to which none of the other nations are held. There are at least 100 countries that have much worse human rights, rule of law, discrimination against women, no rights for LGBT. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So that Israel is held to the standard that it's held to can only be explained by some kind of bias against Jews. I cannot, for the life of me, fathom any other reason for the scrutiny that Israel is put under when other nations are given a free pass.
So just to expand on that, Howie, I think it was Natan Sharansky. I know it was Sharansky who used the 3D test and to really explain or expand on what you were sharing with. Number two is the double standard, right? So the Human Rights Council, which has the greatest offenders of human rights, are there criticizing Israel in the United Nations. This is their double standard. Israel should be scrutinized like any other country, but Israel is a democratic country, as you shared, with all of these rights that are given to all these different minorities, and yet there is a complete double standard, both the United Nations and, I might add, in various progressive circles. In addition, there is the demonization, where and we're seeing these anti-Semitic caricatures in cartoons, or even statements of the Jews hypnotizing or the Israelis hypnotizing. This is a demonization, and then there's a delegitimization. To delegitimize, as is the third D, is saying that they have no right to exist. To say that a country has no right to exist, that is delegitimizing. And so those are the 3 Ds that Sharansky points out. Really, as you're saying, this is something obviously we have a common ground in. I think the question is where does this all come from? What is the basis of this? And I think that's
Right.
where we differ.
Exactly, and I think we do differ on that. So, my perspective is that the Jew has throughout history been the paradigm of the other. Ever since the temple was destroyed in the year 70 and our people went into exile all over the world, we have had a status in the host societies in which we have lived, which has been lower than everybody else. There's roots of that within religion. So in the Muslim world, we were considered also people of the book, so we couldn't have our lives taken away from us. But there were certain rules put in place, tax that we had to pay. We couldn't ride on horses. Our places of worship couldn't be taller than the mosques around, and various other restrictions put on us because we were Jewish that relegated us to a second-class status. And certainly in Christian Europe, we were blamed as being the people who killed God, accused of deicide. And we were not to be destroyed. We were instead to be kept around specifically as a reminder that we were the people that killed God. And so the notion of the Jew as a second-class citizen, as a lower status citizen, worked its way deeply into the cultures of the world. And so I think that the anti-Semitism that we see today is a direct result of the Jew being held up for the last couple thousand years as the paradigm of the other. And people love to hate the other. People need an other on which to blame their problems. They need an other on which to define themselves against. And we continue to suffer from that legacy today.
So I agree with everything you said. Everything you said before makes sense, except for the last part, right? And the reality is that yes, we have been persecuted for one reason or the other for 2,000 years. And there's a book by Dennis Prager called "Why the Jews," and he goes through, with background and research, why we were persecuted in countries because we were rich and because we were poor, because we were powerful and because we were weak, because we were ugly and because we were good looking. And that you have a million reasons, all contradicting each other on why there is hatred towards the Jews. We mentioned before we started the session that Herzl had this belief that said that if the Jews had their own country, that they would be in the family of nations, and then people will like them because they'll be just like everybody else. They won't be the other. They'll have their own country, right? All this is great, but Herzl was wrong, and everybody is wrong. To say that this is the reason why we're hated, or Israel now, it's manifested in Israel, is hated, is because of the fear of the other. There are so many others. It's not like nationalism is on the rising. It's actually the nationalists are not necessarily the ones who are bringing out, well, that's not necessarily true, coming from all sides, but these issues of xenophobia, they're coming from Western countries which have others everywhere. And in fact, they call the Jews the other. If you look at you go to the Western Wall on a Friday night, you'll see that the Jews don't look like anything. There is no race anymore. So to be called the others, so there's a whole group of Mormons. You can go get the Mormons. I'm not saying to go get the Mormons, right? But there are many other groups that are smaller, that are this, whatever, that you can persecute, that you can hate, you can blame things on. Why is it that they blame the Jews? And I think that's really the difference between our thinking. When you've come to a conclusion that there is no rational argument, and all of the arguments they say that are irrational, then there has to be something higher. There's some sort of spiritual phenomenon that's taking place that has no rational explanation, cannot be explained in this world. You can only understand, as the Haggadah says, every generation they stand up to destroy us, and God saves us. And somehow there is some sort of divine reason to explain why this happens, but you cannot find me a rational explanation that makes full sense. And I don't think it exists.
As you said, yes, we disagree on this. I have trouble believing in a God that would require us to be persecuted in every generation. For me, that line in the Haggadah is descriptive, not prescriptive. And for me, I like to believe that there are relationships that we can build and ways that we can educate people to reduce anti-Semitism. So while there is anti-Semitism in our world today, and there is anti-Semitism in the United States today, it is at historically low levels, higher than it was 10 years ago, much better than it was 100 years ago. And I like to believe that comes from our relationships with our friends and neighbors. Does it solve the problem of anti-Semitism? Absolutely not. Does it help it for our generation and, God willing, the next generation? I believe it can. So yesterday, I welcomed the class of sixth graders from the German School of New York, which is in White Plains. I welcomed their sixth graders to our congregation. They came for a tour of the sanctuary and to meet with a rabbi and to understand what are Jews and what is Judaism. I don't think that I'm single-handedly solving problems of anti-Semitism, but
yes, you are, Howie. You're saving the world. Come on.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ira. But any time that we can have meaningful dialogue and meaningful education and meaningful interactions, I think it does create some tikkun. It does fix the problem a little bit. I'm not saying you can solve the problem completely, but we can work on it. So it makes it much more difficult to work on if it's divinely ordained that in every generation they should stand up to destroy us.
So I'll explain. I don't disagree with you. And in fact, our congregation will just scheduled an iftar dinner that's going to take place in May.
Oh, you just totally one-upped me.
Yeah, see? You can come, Howie, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, you get sixth graders. Come on, I got iftar, right? So, we, I get this, and I recognize the importance of relationships that cross these lines in order to educate. And Holocaust education is vital, but we are living at interesting times, and I'm not getting comfortable because the rise of anti-Semitism is a very scary thing, especially in Europe. And I shared with you the other day, and anyone who believes that we've resolved all these problems and now that these things can never happen again, the Holocaust can never happen again, because we live in the Golden Medina, even though we lived in a wonderful country, anyone who truly believes that is historically naive, because look at the past. So we make every effort, and we try to educate, and we try to build bridges, and I agree with that 100%. I will tell you, though, that it will never be wiped out, and because until perhaps a Messianic age, but it will never be wiped out, and I don't have an answer why. I don't profess to know all the answers. I don't have an answer why. I just know, based on history, this is always going to exist.
Well, so I'll throw one quote at you to finish today, which is Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. That even if we can't finish the work, we're not free to desist from trying to make the world.
Lo ata ben chorin livatel mimenu.
That's right. That's right. We are not free to desist from doing the work. So hopefully we can make things a little bit better wherever the anti-Semitism comes from. There are things that we can do to make it a little bit better.
Thanks, Howie. Good way to end.
Okay. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Take care.